local pastor of this church. And I want to extend a very warm welcome to everyone. I can see we have a few people from outside the city. So welcome to Wolverhampton if you're not a resident of this city. I give God thanks for the safe arrival of everyone who's here. And it is an honor and privilege for us to host this special event. SuCoTeTo. Did I get that right? Nearly. Well, the authentic pronunciation of it will come after this. But it's the 2nd year anniversary. And to Ruth and to Esther and to those involved in this important endeavor, congratulations to you. Well done to you. I'm sure that will also come after. And I also want to say to our special guests and dignitaries here, you will be formally recognized in a while, but I want to extend a special welcome to you as well. For the housekeeping, may I respectfully ask if you have a mobile phone, please just check it's in silent mode or just turn it off to prevent any interruptions. If you are not used to this building, our toilets are on this side of the building, on the other side of that wall. So if you come down that side aisle, do a U-turn, you'll find the toilets around there. And we're not expecting any emergencies. So if there is one, just stay where you are, remain calm, and you'll get further instructions. Thank you. May I invite us to bow our heads for prayer as we begin. God, our Father of love and grace, we thank you that on this wonderful evening we can be gathered here for this unique and special event. We thank you for your presence with us. Thank you for those who have journeyed from near and far, and for the organizers of this event. We pray your blessing upon the proceedings this evening, all that will take place, Lord, in this venue, who will bring honor and glory to your name. And so we commend, Lord, everything into your care now. In Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, I'm going to invite you to just put your hands together and welcome the host for this evening, who is Mr. Adrian Roberts. Let's welcome him as he comes.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. It's wonderful to see you out this evening when you could have been somewhere else. We hope everything will go well this evening, and we would like you all to feel relaxed as we go through the evening. What I need to say first of all, I noticed some people have brought some water with them. I assure you, this is water and a little bit of apple ties. So please don't worry if you see me drinking this one. What I'd like to do first of all is to send the apologies of the VIPs. Now, we're all VIPs here in different ways. We're important people, especially in the eyes of God. But there are some who were meant to be here, and they're not here for various reasons. And first of all, we have Bishop Gilroy Brown, the chair. You must excuse me, I'm not very woke. Chair. I mean, he's a man. Chairman. Can I say that without being kicked out? Yes, he's the chairman of the C.A.R.E group. This is the Communities Against Racism Enterprise. There's Martin Livermore, NBE, Deputy Lieutenant to the King. Sounds very antiquated. I love it. Lieutenant to the King. Can you imagine he's going to get out a sword or something? Lord Lieutenant Sir John Crabtree, David Patterson, Chief Operating Officer for Wolverhampton City Council, Matthew Gordon, CEO for Spectra, And Sandra Samuels, MP previously and previous mayor, we don't know if she's going to come. She may still come, but she's got something that she has to deal with. And her husband as well, Carl Samuels. And now the acknowledgements. First of all, before we acknowledge anyone here, we acknowledge the great Spirit and Creator, God. He is the ultimate guest here. First of all, I'd like to, and when I mention you, if you could just stand so that everyone can see who you are, that would help. That would be very useful. Simon Foster, the Police and Crime Commissioner for the West Midlands. Big hand, thank you. Thank you very much. Alethea Fuller, Deputy Executive Crime Commissioner for the West Midlands. I noticed she's been a bit cleverer than me. She's got her drink in a flask. I don't know what it is, but I've noticed when she came in, she took a drink and now she's... I was a bit reluctant to get her to stand up, actually. Bishop Paul Thomas from the New Testament Church of God. Oh, okay. We may come back to that. Michelle Uguizi, is she here? Oh, great. Police Race Action Plan Manager and Detective Inspector. Calvin Wilson. Not yet, maybe he's on his way. And also we have Susan Vickers, Director for Wolverhampton Community Radio and founder of the Susan Vickers Foundation for Children who have been in care. And Garfield Spencer, Chair for the Council of Black Majority Churches in the West Midlands. Maybe he's in the toilet, we don't know. Dr. Beverly Lindsay OBE, Vice Lord Lieutenant of the West Midlands and founder and manager of Diamond Travel, one of the West Midlands' leading travel agencies. Is Donald Campbell here? Ah, great. Donald Campbell, Warrant Officer in Royal Air Force and founder of a number of things which we may be able to go through, but I see the pressure on me for the time to get through. That's Donald Campbell. Lisa Murray, Specialist Commissioner for Mental Health for NHS Foundation Trust. Okay, I think we've got through everyone here. Now, what I'd like to do, I noticed that the pastor of the church had a little bit of difficulty. The actual symbol for CARE, I know how to do this really easily. The why didn't Karen just say the wreath? What's wrong? What's all this? Hang on. SuCoTeTo. You're laughing. Okay, let me hear you say it. Come on, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, all right, okay. Ruth in South is going to come up and speak about it so we know what it means. Big hand. Why she couldn't just call it a flower, I don't know.
Too kind, thank you. Is this mic working? Do you want to? This one. I need my. Sorry for the delay, because I need, right, the thing is, I've got to use both hands to navigate because the wire should have been running through to my laptop, but they haven't done so. So I'm going to double up. Is it? I'll try and project while we're waiting. Right. Is it on? Let's see if I can do it. Ah, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, technology team. So, what was the inspiration behind the SuCoTeTo? Right, I'm going to try and see if I can work this. And I can, because it's buzzing. Right, so, you know that we've marched. There's marches all over the place. We've actually wrote a plethora of books. We've wrote poems. You've got our very own Benjamin Zephaniah and Maya Angelou. The one before that, previous to that, was our very own born and homegrown Maccabee. He's written poems and sang songs, right? Not only that, so I'm navigating two hands here, not only that, we have sang amazing songs. You know, Bob Marley's an amazing icon with his One Love song. And we've had great orators. And some have even taken the knee in solidarity against racism. Now we've had historians like David Osologa. Now he wrote a plethora of books, along with some of us here as well, but he actually brought to life racism in Britain and racism globally. And I wonder why all these people were doing such things. Now, the brain is an amazing organ in our body. And I want you to go all the way down. So we've got 10. And I want you to go to the temporal lobe and look at the bottom one of the temporal lobe. It says memory. Hold that in mind. All the rest are very important, but hold the bit on memory in mind. And I want you to remember. Remember, what do you say? Reparations. We know that slavery was a very insidious practice. It was about economics initially, as you can see. The money going into the hands of those who didn't deserve it for the way they treated folk. But I had an idea. I thought, why is it that we are so undervalued? Why is it that we don't feel worthy or accepted? And I had an idea, I had an action plan. I'm a solution-focused kind of a woman, and if I see a need, I will try and address it. Now, we talk about reparations. What if you won the lottery? This man won £1 million, and what did he say? If you win the lottery, my advice is to give the money back, as it's not worth the trouble, unless you have good family support and good financial advice, because he blew every penny. And I thought to myself, yes, we need to have reparation, but it's about the reparation of the mind. You can have all the money in the world and still your mind is not repaired. So it goes hand in hand. Financial reparation and our minds need to be repaired to enjoy the reparation that we are going to get, Robert. We know this, don't we? If God's got anything to do with it, it will be borne out. Now, we talk about incidences like, let me see what's going on here. Right, here we go. Right, World War I and World War II. We have a good memory of it, don't we? If I said to you, what happened in 1066, any of you good students out there can tell me? Battle of Hastings. So your memory is spot on. That's why I said remember the temporal lobe. Now we remember the 11th of November, Remembrance Sunday. And that is to do with a war. And I thought, it's interesting how we remember it year after year, but yet we don't remember those worldwide who created the things that we love and enjoy to this day. So the wreath was created out of that. I said, let me see what we enjoy globally. And has any of you eaten any sugar today? Any coffee? Any tea? Those of you who like chocolate, eaten any? These are global products, and they weren't derived from Asda, Waitrose, for those posh ones amongst us, Harrods. It came from the sugarcane field. So that's the first acronym for SuCoTeTo. Where's Adrian? Did he put his teeth in? Right? Sh for sugar. And the plantation was an arduous place, but yet we're enjoying something that people died, broke their backs for, and didn't even benefit from, hence reparations. So the cotton was the next thing on my list. I says, oh, the slaves picked cotton, and that was the CO for the cotton. And there we have the commodities that these slaves picked. And then you have the children and their parents working from dawn till dusk. They were the ones who picked the cotton, and they probably also made the mask that the Ku Klux Klan wore and didn't even realize. Because remember, not the overseer, the landowner, the plantation owner didn't do anything. Their wives did a little bit of embroidery, but the slaves made the majority of the commodities that they enjoyed in their homes. And I believe the Ku Klux Klan mask was one of them. So we have cocoa. We all like a bit of chocolate. I've got a sweet tooth. I've not been eating as much chocolate as I used to. I'm thankful for that. But the cocoa was one commodity that was picked. Then we have the coffee. And then we had the tea. And last but not least, we have tobacco, which made up the name SuCoTeTo. And it's interesting how these commodities, nobody understands the journey that these slaves had to go through. So we need to remember, as we journey along with me through this, that this is where it accumulated from. So, remember when I mentioned the children on the plantation? They were picking cotton with their parents. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever felt a cotton flower. Hands up those of you who have actually held a cotton flower. 1 lady, 2, 3, any more? The cotton flower is very, very sharp. So sharp that these poor children, their fingers would bleed. They had no gloves, there was no protection, to the point that their hands would get calloused by the virtue of them repeatedly picking cotton from dawn till dusk. Now this man, who's heard of Resma Menakem? Anybody heard of him? He wrote a book called My Grandmother's Hands. One day he sat on his grandmother's knee and he said, "Grandmother, why are your hands so hard?" She said, "Son, when I was a child, younger than you, I was picking cotton." He said he'd never felt such callous hands as his grandmother. And he wrote a book on it, and it says, Racialized Trauma and the Pathway to Mending Our Hearts and Bodies. So it's an amazing book, and I think we should all read it just to understand the depth and the enormity of the pain that picking cotton for the pleasure of those who hated us was. But we know, God says, "For I will restore health to you, I will heal your wounds, says the Lord." And that's in Jeremiah 30:17. One thing I haven't mentioned, and can you actually see out of you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, there's one that's a lot darker than everyone else. I was inspired, which means it didn't come from me, to make a darker red dot. And that darker red dot is for the Almighty God. Some believe it's a higher power, some believe it's a universe. For me, it's God. Because it represents how much God abhors racism. And that's why financial reparation needs to be had. Because we didn't ask for this, it was given to us. So that red dot, when you see it around, you know that represents God. We wouldn't have needed all of this, and we've got some amazing people in this room, and one of them is our keynote speaker, Professor Robert Beckford, and he is looking at Christian reconciliation, repairing the damage of the transatlantic slave. Now, I do these talks all over the place, and one of them we have pre-slavery, during slavery, the transatlantic, and then while they're on the plantation. And some of these people were so, how can I put it, terrified of being slaves that they actually jumped overboard. Now, who are these people? We don't know them. They have watery graves. Some of them did make it to the plantation, as we know, and they died there, not understanding why they were taken. So, Robert, I applaud you for doing this. You've done many other things. He's got some wonderful books out there. Did you bring any today? Okay, but they're on Amazon. So have a look and have a read of his books, because he's worked really hard to try to repair the damage of the transatlantic slave, and it's from the Christian perspective, as you can see there. So the wreath is also for female abolitionists. We know there was many, but we don't hear about them, and this is why the remembrance part that Robert will speak about later will be something that you need to listen and grab hold of. So we had some women. You have Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman, they actually called her Moses. You've got Delia Ann Webster. She was a white lady, but she knew that God spoke to her to release the slaves, or to help release the slaves, the Underground Railroad. Now, without women like Delia, Harriet would not have been able to do what she did. We've got to have allies, and we've got some wonderful allies, and I'll mention Simon Foster a bit later on. But you've got Sojourner Truth, honorary women, but their names are now being brought to the fore. We can't forget our men, our wonderful men. We have many male abolitionists. We know we've got Sam Sharp, Paul Bogle, we've got Bass Reeves and Nat Turner, and these men were men of God. And I find it outstanding that we still serve a God, but because we know that this wasn't a thing from God. Racism is not a God thing. The wreath is also to remember, when this comes, right, so we've done those men. God heals wounds, and slavery is a wound that needs to be healed, because many people think that they're okay, but their hearts are not healed. But as we know, with God, all things are possible. And we know in Great Britain, slavery was possible. We know they had a massive slavery cohort where they bought and sold slaves. There's a lot being documented on it. David Oceloga did a fantastic BBC series on it. Go and have a look if it's still up. And this young man at the time, if I can get this to go. Right, go back. So, Olaudah Equiano, or Equiano for some of you who, potato. The African slave lived and published here in 1789 his autobiography on suffering, the barbarity of slavery, which paved the way to its abolition. And he was a contemporary of William Wilberforce. There's a lot that's not said about William Wilberforce. But 3 weeks before he died, he passed the baton on to Thomas Buxton, who was a brewer, but a Christian brewer. So he had what was in Adrian's bottle. And he died 3 weeks before he realized that slavery was abolished. So kudos to him. But Thomas Buxton carried the baton. We also have men like Grenville Sharp, who was another abolitionist, and Josiah Wedgwood. Some of you may or may not know Josiah Wedgwood, but he was the one that commissioned this. Am I not a man and a brother? How cruel to even have a man say that about himself, a man that is made in the divinity of God. I'm just going to enlarge the picture for you. Begging and pleading, please release me, let me go. What have I done to you? It breaks my heart. And that was the Jubilee commemoration for the abolition of slavery, 1834. Now, Racism, the new form of slavery. Same evil. But I want to ask you to think about this. Why do you hate the color of my skin? And who taught me to hate the color of my skin? But we don't hate chocolate. We actually love the taste of chocolate. When it trickles down our throats, it's like, wow. But the same color as a chocolate is the same color as my skin. But some will hate me, but love the chocolate. We've got Nestle, Cadbury's, Mars. We've got Bounty. We've got so many chocolataires or tours that it can go out of my mind with chocolate. But yet you hate the color of my skin. I also think about gardeners, farmers who dig the black dirt. But yet we're growing food in the black dirt, but yet you hate the skin of a black person. To me, it really is a mental health issue. That's why we need the reparation of the mind. So the wreath is also to remember police racism. We know it's rife, and it's a shame. And that's why, Simon, I'm glad you're here. You are not the police. So we need to stop police brutality. We had a memorial about a couple of months ago for Clinton McKerbin. As you can see there, we have Clinton, we have George Floyd, and Mark Duggan. All died at the hands of the police for walking or for just being black. This skin, it's so sad. And it doesn't just end there. We have these men like Blair Peach. Blair Peach hated racism, but he was murdered by the police because he wanted to protect people because of their skin, and he was murdered. The wreath is also for community racism. We think it's just men killing boys or white men killing black boys, but it's a community thing. You've got Dejon Reed, you've got Stephen Lawrence, and you've got Emmett Till, 14 years old, murdered for looking at a white woman. 14, he was on holiday, didn't even live in the state. When I'm doing this right, it brings up a lot of emotions for me all the time, so please bear with me. 14, barely lived. Little known, Kelso Cochran, he preceded obviously Stephen Lawrence, but he was murdered again by the community. Community racism is probably the biggest form of racism that there is. And this picture here, nigger, not wanted here. But I just want to build my shop, I just want to build a livelihood. We don't want you here. Even Lord Taylor. So title doesn't get you doesn't win you no favors. No blacks, no dogs, no Irish. And he wrote a book on it, that was his experience. So having a title does not exempt you from this. The wreath is also for the Windrush generation. We know the horrors of that. We was going through the Windrush situation just the other day, and it was wonderful. We had a really nice time, didn't we, Donald, at the archives? It was fantastic, and it's nice that we remember. So the wreath is also for, please work for me. Right, let me go back. Again, these men were assassinated, and I tend to find that, again, colour doesn't mean anything if you like black people. This man, David Webster, murdered because he was against apartheid. So whether you're Asian, whether you're black, if you're against racism, your life may just end. Freedom fighters and activists, all murdered apart from obviously Nelson Mandela, but the wreath is for them too. Because you know what? No one gets a pass. We're all involved. Now, this one is quite sad. It's racism in schools. A young boy's in school, 11 years old. He had racial connotations against him. He was being chased, and he lost his finger because it got stuck in the fence. Did you hear about that? Any one of you? Yes? So racism in school is rife. And the Wolverhampton Grammar School, they asked me to come in to speak about the wreath, and I spoke to 500 children. At least 500 children now are educated on SuCoTeTo and on racism and on the plantations, and that their products came from somewhere, and it's given them something that they can take on to their parents and talk about. But that was one of my wonderful things that I did with the wreath. So it's about educating them. But we know we've got racism in social work. We have it to the point that Unison has to get involved, and these, as it says there, the uncomfortable conversations needs to be had. It's also in the legal profession. It's also a part of Stop and Search. Adrian has got an amazing story. He won't tell it today, but from that story, he experienced his son going through something horrific. As it says here, you're 20 times more likely to be stopped and searched in London if you don't have white skin, because we're still really racist, and that's the Metropolitan Police. I don't know who put that on the billboard, but it's there, and it wasn't me, and I haven't gone to it yet, so you can't even see it. There it is. So from that, Adrian and I co-authored a book called the A-Kit book, the handbook for the being community when interacting with the police. Because it was necessary, because our young men don't know our rights. I don't know who this man in the middle is, but he's a very, very kind-hearted man. And this man, Simon Foster, that's Simon Fuller then, Simon Foster, he doesn't just give lip service, he actually does what he says on the tin. He's there and he supports, and he's done some wonderful things in the black and people of colour community. So kudos to you again, because you could have said, okay, let me just give lip service and keep it moving, but you haven't. You've really done some wonderful things. And maybe one day we can have you come back and talk about all what you've been doing in our community. Actually, I went to find Simon, and there was a bin, and it says, this bin was put here by the Police and Crimes Commissioner, and it was a bin to surrender knives. And it's just inside the car park of this church, so you're really doing your work, and I'm glad you got voted back in. Well done. It was a hard thing you had to do, but you got voted back in. But what saddens me is this. How could this be? Black and Asian Police Association. What is the need to have that in an organisation that's supposed to protect and serve if you can't protect and serve your own officers? This is why racism is so insidious. This is why we need to find those officers who are coming in with a mindset that needs to be repaired, because they are not allowing the good officer to do their jobs well, because they get tarnished with the same brush. Oh, one bad apple. But no, it's people going in there sometimes to do insidious things. So I'll be talking to you about that, Simon, when we get a moment, on how we can have a look at racist people who are police. The police force is not racist, it's racist people in the police force. And I can say that because this poor woman, she said, my 30-year struggle, with racism in the Metropolitan Police, 30 years. It's incredible. So from that, C.A.R.E, Community Against Racism Enterprise, we had a STOP conference not too long ago, and there's Simon again. We had the STOP conference, Stop Traumatizing Our People conference. I don't know how big that is for you, but we had some amazing speakers, which Sharon was one, and it was a wonderful experience. Alethea was another speaker. It was absolutely amazing, because people of colour came, and I didn't realise how many people felt the pressure of racism within their employment. So we will be doing another one of those again, because we knew the trauma was deep. And again, Simon Foster, our elected West Midlands Police and Crimes Commissioner, is so supportive of what we are trying to achieve here, and that is to eradicate racism. I went to a Stephen Lawrence Memorial Day. Thanks for the invite, Michelle. It was a wonderful time, as well, Alethea. And Simon was there, and he spoke on racism is a hate crime. Hate crime is against anything that is not conducive to building up a community. And I know you've meant what you've said again, and I'm looking forward to see what you were going to do with the agenda of hate crime. So the wreath again is for people who have fought in world wars. You've got the Royal Navy, Army. It says Army be the best. You've got the Royal Air Force. But the British Army is accused of race. I see I put it down and I need to keep is accused of racism. This soldier was blackfacing. And I'm like, really? You're fighting for Queen and country? Well, king now. And you're still doing things like this. Doreen Miller's bravery helped fight Navy racism. Racism in the military, a former officer's story, and this young man's called Harry, and it tells a horrific story. Now, I don't know if anybody can see this man here. This man is called Donald Campbell. And Donald, I was doing a bit of a sneaky look into your history in the army, and I found this. Am I allowed to read it? It's in the public domain, because it was on the online. So Donald Campbell is an amazing man. He started an organisation called Forgotten Generations, and he did an interview with the RAF, am I correct? And they asked him this question: did you experience any racism while in the RAF? Donald said, often. And I can give you a classic example. I was at the station headquarters filling in a form for a particular overseas posting. The young lady who worked there was watching me, and suddenly she said, "Oh, you can't go there." "What do you mean?" I asked. "Because you're black," she replied. Then she went and got a document and started showing me where it was written that black personnel couldn't be posted there. Her boss saw what was happening and almost broke her arm as she snatched it away from her. Donald said, "I just wanted to serve, as did every other black serviceman and woman, but we were told we couldn't because of the colour of our skin." Thankfully, by the end of my RAF career, I've seen change. And there's now a whole BAME network where people can plug into to talk about issues and get advice from people with shared backgrounds and experiences. You can have a mentor or be a mentee, and it means you have a listening ear. Wonderful. It was a wonderful interview, because I read it. So I had to share that with you because we've got our very own man. You was a, what was you now? You was in the army, in the RAF, sorry. You was an engineer, right? So there's something else I got in my head about what you did. But yes, he's a founder of the Forgotten Generation. So because of that, Donald, I thought, let me see what we can do. I thought about it before, but you convicted me of it. I used to work with the Samaritans many moons ago. And it was a wonderful experience. And I was thinking, well, Donald's saying you've got a listening ear. The Samaritans know that people need an ear to listen to. And I was there, and I heard some horrific stories while I was there. So, and that wasn't to do with racism. So, I remember it's all about the reparation of the mind. The trauma is real. And Communities Against Racism, one blood, one race, one people, we're solution focused. So I teamed up with an organisation called Headspace Training, because Headspace Training, they do restorative practice. They're an amazing consultancy service, and we work together quite well. Tap into them, please, because they do parenting and restorative language with children, restorative language with adults. So we teamed up because we knew we had to do something for the community. Children need to be listened to. Adults need to be listened to. The trauma is real, people. We all know what we've gone through. It's not just black people, it's people of colour. The pain is real. So, SuCoTeTo and C.A.R.E, we want to safeguard children from racial trauma. So we are looking to have a helpline. Now we was going to do a soft launch, but we didn't need to. The amount of phone calls I've had from people saying racism in school, racism in the NHS, racism at work, racism as a lawyer. It's just too much. We didn't even need a soft launch. The helpline needs to be done now. So people, shamefully begging you for donations. There is a donation box outside. We need your help. We can't do it alone. There's funding out there, but every time we go for funding, there's always hurdles and barriers to get through. We don't mind collaborating with projects that can actually help us. So if you think if there's anything of value for us to do for you or you for us, let's collaborate to our shared goals. The money's there. It's there to train the volunteers to help others who have been victims and traumatized because of skin color. Become a patron if you have to. Remember, it's all about love. Love is the foundation of life. Without life, none of us would be here, would we, to be fair? And remember, God created our skin tones with beautiful variety, and all of our souls are the same. Remember, it's a global reparation of the mind. In closing, all people are important. They need to feel valued, loved, respected, and protected. And remember, there's a verse in the Bible, John 3:16. If none of us was important, this verse would not be written. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life. The focus of life is love. To bring restoration, healing, and change in a unique, symbolic, and peaceful way. And if you ever want to contact C.A.R.E, our details are here. And I want to say thank you, and I pray that God will touch your hearts, that racism will be a thing that is no more. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ruth Lynn. That was very thought-provoking. It's interesting, you know, we speak about these things all the time, and there are champions within other communities. You know, you've got white people who speak up for black people, just like our good friend and brother here on this side. You know, you've got Jane Elliott and Timothy Wise over on the other side of the Atlantic. And then you've got some people within our community who don't do us good. I couldn't believe it when Boris Johnson said there was no such thing as institutional racism because one of his colleagues, Tony Sewell, did research on it, and he's a black man. It's incredible. But it does exist, and you know, we tend to think it's more subtle these days. Well, it has evolved, but it's still there. Some friends of ours who moved into a posh area of Wolverhampton and had their house remastered found when they came back one day, written on the wall, and I'm not politically correct, I don't say N-word, it said niggers. And that's just within a couple of years ago. And so it's still around. And at this time, I'd like to invite someone to come up here and say a poem. His name is Ian Henry. Not Henry, but Henry. Okay, so, and he's a retired solicitor, and he's also poet laureate and Lord of Withersdale. And also he's very much into radio, WCR FM, and a producer there in the Black Country Extra. This is a very interesting listen. And so, without saying any more, I'd just like to bring him up. Can we have a big hand for Mr. Ian Henry? Thank you. Do you need this one?
No, I'll be all right. Don't know what to say now. I'm embarrassed. I'll tell you what I will say, though. Adrian, SuCoTeTo. Bless Adrian, I love him. 2 years ago, Ruth asked me to write a poem. You don't say no to Ruth. There she is. You don't say no to Ruth. When Ruth asks you to do something, you say, did you want it done yesterday? And I says, okay, Ruth, for you, anything. And I mean anything. I mean, Ruth. God, I'm glad I'm retired. God. And I'll say, okay, Ruth, for you, anything. What do you want me to do? And she says, well, I want you to write a poem based upon John chapter 3, verse 16. The SuCoTeTo Wreath. And I said, okay, well, give me the brief so I can get it right. I need to know what you want, the style, the words. I need to get the vibe in the words. So you're happy with what I'm writing for you, because for you, anything. So she sent me a brief, and I wrote this in an afternoon, and it's 2 years old, and I'm chuffed to bits to be here. It's called The SuCoTeTo Wreath of Hope and Healing, and it's based upon John chapter 3, verse 16. Father, forgive them, words upon the cross. It's a prayer of unmatched mercy and love. Son of God praying for our sins and loss on earth as it is in heaven above. Jesus, for they do not know what they do, but now we know better. SuCoTeTo. SuCoTeTo, acronym for products picked by slaves, sugar, cocoa, cotton, coffee and tea. People in chains from cradle to the grave, not forgetting tobacco, used daily. All are still enjoyed on a global scale, but forget slavery, Jesus' nails. SuCoTeTo, a wreath to remember, never forget. Coffee, cocoa, tea, tobacco is brown, cotton a flower, plantations ran with sweat, square a sugar cube, the enslaved who drowned on the slave ships, all the blood that was shed, picking products, violence, a dot that's red. SuCoTeTo, death through enslavement, activism, violence, racial traumas, a global pandemic. We must come together, break the silence, regardless of culture. It's endemic. And far away, a crucified man cries, Father, forgive them. Tears fall from his eyes. Thank you.
Wow. Short and sweet. If it wasn't for the constant reminders of my inability. Sounds almost like a swear word, doesn't it? I don't know where they got it from. It's sort of got a Jamaican element. It's like a kissing of the teeth. SuCoTeTo. See, I have to be very careful. See these two teeth here? They were screwed in, they're false. And I sat in the audience once in a church, and I seen a guy who had his false teeth, and he was saying something like, SuCoTeTo, and his tooth fell out on the floor in the middle of his sermon. So I'm very self-conscious. And so, but these are screwed in, so I can say it with confidence. Thank you very much, Ian Henry. And now, a very special moment. I would like to invite someone up here, someone who's got a beautiful voice. And I've encouraged her to make an album. She hasn't done it yet. But I think she's absolutely wonderful. I can sing a bit as well. Sometimes in our life, we'll move on to this young lady. Her name is Bianca Reed Passell. Can we have a big hand, please? Thank you. And when she sings, you'll understand what I mean. She's wasting her time. Tell her she needs to make an album.
Evening, everybody. Evening. Oh, yes, it's on. So, the song that I've chose to sing, I believe it's straight to the point, but it's one that's a message of hope, of unity, and of volume. I'm only joking. Yeah, it's one that's of hope, of unity, and I believe restoration, not necessarily in this life, but definitely in the life to come, in Jesus' name. So just remain optimistic. That's the name of the song. Do you want me to use this one instead? I promise I haven't touched nothing. Yeah? Hello? Yeah? No? Can you hear me from the speakers? Should we hear? No? Okay. No? This one? This one? Oh, okay. All right. Oh. Hello? Oh, hello? Which one? Hello? Okay. Yeah. Right then. We'll crack on.
Hey, she's got the idea. Short and sweet, to the point. She gets you calling out for more. That's very clever, that is. Okay. Some years ago, I remember looking at the television and I saw this young black man with long dreadlocks. And I thought, when I heard his voice, I thought, oh, he's some part of a new British reggae band. But then when I saw the actual content of what he was talking about, I was transfixed. I just couldn't believe it. His knowledge of the history that I wasn't aware of, the history of my ancestors, it was absolutely incredible. But I tell you, I did envy him because he had those locks, and I've always wanted to be able to do this like Bob Marley and see that. And any time I do this, the only thing that happens, I get a bit dizzy. But I think he now has tried to copy me. And he has shaved and cleaned his head, such that we look pretty much similar, I would think. He's a man, I'm a man. He's black, I'm black. He's a professor, I have a profession. And yet, I still feel that we're connected. No matter how much someone knows who becomes, how can I say, a figure up there who encourages everyone else to discover more. This man is still part of us. And I thought of him as, I don't know, the first David Olusoga, or David Olusoga was the second Robert Beckford, whichever way round you want to look at it. But he's going to speak to us. He's our keynote speaker today. He was born in 1965, I think, in Northampton. And he is a British academic, a theologian. I have to read it. Currently Professor of Climate and Social Justice at the University of Winchester. And he has an associate role as a professor of Black theology at the Queen's Foundation and a professor of theology at the VU University Amsterdam. A BAFTA award winner for his documentaries and filmmaking. And he's presented over 50 presentations and documentaries for the BBC, for Channel 4 and for the Discovery USA. And he's written about 10 books. And yet, he is very down to earth. He hasn't allowed all that he has achieved to make him have a superior air about him. He's very approachable, as you will find if you speak to him after our program today. And so what I would like to do, without further ado, to introduce to you Professor Robert Beckford. Can we have a big hand, please? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for that introduction. Very kind of you. I'm going to be brief because Ruth has been through much of the history that I may have spoken about, so I don't want to go over that ground. And also because it's a Wednesday night, and I know many of you will have to go to work tomorrow morning, so I don't want to be too long at the pulpit. And plus as well, I was raised in the black church tradition. I had those 3-hour sermons. So I'm still traumatized by that. So whenever I get in a pulpit situation, I try and reverse that tradition by being as brief as possible. But I want to start by thanking Ruth for inviting me. When she said to come, I said, definitely I'll make the time and make sure that I can be available to be here, because I think this is a really important project. I don't just think it's a local project, it's a national, international project, because remembering the slave and colonial past isn't just something that is for people of Caribbean heritage. It isn't just for people who are African American. It isn't even for our kinfolk in Africa. It's for everybody, because Caribbean history is world history. Caribbean history, black history, is everybody's history. So it's for everybody to learn this stuff and to become acquainted with it. It's vitally important. Just to say that I like being in Wolverhampton as well, because believe it or not, in a previous life, I actually played for Wolves. I was with Wolverhampton Wanderers as a schoolboy up until I was 17. I was an apprentice for 1 year. That's as long as I could last before they realised I was really rubbish. And so consequently, luckily, because I'd taken my education seriously, I was able to go back to school, finish my A-levels and pursue an academic career. So I do enjoy coming to Wolverhampton. Brings back some really good memories of the old days when Wolves were in the old First Division, you remember? Andy Gray, I think, was still playing. Yes, playing up front. Emlyn Hughes as well was still around. Crazy Horse was still around. John Burridge, the goalkeeper, crazy goalkeeper. My goodness, he's a character. Almost broke my legs, but that's another story. So thank you for inviting me. What I want to talk about briefly is this: remembering rightly. Remembering rightly. And I want to talk about that because when we deal with the slave and colonial past, we remember. But what we often do not do is remember rightly. And what I mean by that is we don't remember in a way that is productive, creative, or redemptive. And I want to take you through, in the time that I have, just 3 ways in which we can ensure that we remember rightly. Now, in my church, you see, when my pastor says something like remember rightly, we have to repeat it. So remember rightly. That's it, you know. If you don't say it on time, at the end of the service, he has one of them long altar calls, you know what I mean? 3-hour altar calls. So everybody comes up. Even the mice are coming up because they want to get out, you know what I mean? You know how it goes in those Pentecostal church tradition. Remembering rightly. How do we then ensure that we remember rightly? First thing is that we have to deal with what the great Dean of British Sociology, Stuart Hall, called selective historical amnesia. Selective historical amnesia. Stuart Hall taught us that when we remember the past in Britain, we only remember the bits that we like. And we leave out a lot of important parts that we need to empower us today. And slave and colonial history is an example of selective historical amnesia. Because when it's taught in schools, only a couple of modules, and they only deal with enslavement. They don't deal with the prehistory of African people in West Africa, in Central Africa, and neither do they deal with the fact that when we're talking about abolition, the first abolitionists were Africans. Selective historical amnesia means that we don't fully understand what took place. We're only given a snapshot. And as a consequence, most people are ignorant about the history, and as they say in North America, ignorant about their ignorance. And so consequently, do not completely understand what took place. Selective historical amnesia. When I was younger and prettier and made programs for Channel 4, so when you're old and ugly, put you on radio, so most of my work is on BBC Radio 4 and BBC World Service. We used to try and get the BBC TV to make programs on transatlantic chattel slavery. We call it transatlantic chattel slavery because we distinguish it from other forms of enslavement. Transatlantic chattel slavery has unique features. No rights for enslaved people. Didn't work that way in Ghana. Didn't work that way in what is contemporary Nigeria. Didn't work that way in what is contemporary Congo. If you're an enslaved person, you had rights. Second thing that makes it distinguishable from other forms of enslavement is that in other forms of slavery, even within the European context, you were considered human. Transatlantic chattel slavery not only didn't give enslaved African people rights, it said you were less than human. 3/5 human in North America. The British considered us to be little children in the Caribbean. Distinguishes transatlantic chattel slavery from other forms of slavery. So when people say, well, everybody was doing enslavement, well, actually, this is distinctive, transatlantic chattel slavery. So we don't know the history. We tried to get them to make programs about slavery. Now, we thought we were quite clever when we put the pitch together, because you say what you want to say to get the money to make the program, but you kind of hide things within it that you really, really want to do. And I'd spent years trying to pitch these ideas, you see, but I didn't have enough gravitas. So I brought in my old mate from this part of the country, Lenny Henry. The last pitch we handed the BBC was a few years ago. And I brought Lenny in because I thought we could probably soften it up. I'd do the funny stuff, Lenny would do it. I'm just joking. Lenny would do the funny stuff, I'd do the serious stuff. And what I attempted to do was put in code what we were really trying to do, because transatlantic chattel slavery is brutal stuff. This is where capitalism goes naked. It's brutal. So we put everything in code in order to try and get this project through. And you know what they asked us to do? They said, we're going to give you the money, but first of all, take all of this coded language out. Because it wasn't coded language, use academic language. You know, that's where you write in code. We put everything in, you know, we'd use language and jargon that they weren't familiar with. When we actually decoded it and presented to them how we wanted the program to work, it was simply a case of showing how seasoning took place in Jamaica. Jamaica was a seasoning center. If you had unruly enslaved Africans, you sent them to Jamaica, they brutalized them. You know, and so we wanted to look at the 5 first years of an enslaved African. We were going to look at these Goa warriors, these warriors who were captured, trafficked to Jamaica, and broken in, wanted to tell their story. And when we decoded it, they said, this is so horrific, the British population could not take this. You see, they couldn't take remembering rightly, and instead, they covered up the history, went for another program that didn't deal with this history, and retained the selective historical amnesia. If we're going to remember rightly, we've got to deal with not only the heroic, but we've got to deal with the grotesque. And it's only through addressing and engaging with the grotesque that we grow as human beings. So we've got to first and foremost, if we want to remember rightly, deal with selective historical amnesia. Tell the people what really happened so we can make an assessment, an accurate assessment of it, and think about what it means for us in the future. That's why people don't want to trouble this stuff. This is serious stuff. You remember enslaved Africans and the kind of labor that they had to endure, the sexual violence that women had to endure. Read the work of Stella Dadzia, Kick in the Belly, looking at sexual violence against enslaved African women in Caribbean plantations during the 17th and 18th century. Read that stuff. Selective historical amnesia blocks our capacity to remember rightly. I just want to say something else about selective historical amnesia. We also have to remember that there are long-standing traditions of black resistance and re-existence and overcoming. When we tell this story, we've also got to put alongside it the way in which enslaved Africans created a world for themselves outside of that oppression. Now, I'm fortunate, I'm Jamaican royal family. I'm a maroon. I'm sorry, I was just born that way, I'm sorry. If you know anything about Jamaican history, you know there are, from the time of the Spanish, from the middle of the 16th century, there were Africans who ran off into the hills, refused to be enslaved, created their own communities. The Spanish called them Cimarron, a corruption of the, well, the British corrupted the word, Cimarron meaning unruly rebels. The British called them the Maroons. If you know your Caribbean history, your Latin American history, you know that these Maroon communities then thrived, maintained their African heritage, identities and cultures, but they turned coat. In the middle of the 18th century, they sided with the British against forms of rebellion on the island of Jamaica. So I know if you're from the Jamaican island, you'll know that there's a good and bad story regarding Maroon heritage. But the reason why I mention the Maroons is because when we're dealing with selective historical amnesia, we have to remember that we often forget what our ancestors did in terms of overcoming. The traditions of resistance. Just look at 19th century Jamaican history. Sam Sharp, Baptist Rebellion, 1831. Sam Sharp is seen as the person who abolished slavery in the Caribbean, not Wilberforce. Call him Wilberforce in Jamaica. Call him a Wilberforce in Jamaica. Don't call him, because Sam Sharp burnt the place down. People don't necessarily, and we have to remember, Wilberforce worked towards ending the slave trade, but slavery as a system wasn't ended in real terms until 1838. 1834 is when they'll tell you, but then they had an apprenticeship scheme, which was just slavery by another name. Made £10 billion out of it, helped pay off the debt to the people the perpetrators who got the money, the compensation at the end of slavery within Britain. Later on in the century, the Caribbean, you have Paul Bogle, not the dance, Paul Bogle. Paul Bogle leading a rebellion in Morant Bay against colonialism. You enter in the early 20th century, contemporary Black Atlantic history, in terms of the struggle for freedom, has at its foundations the work of Marcus Messiah Garvey. Garvey, a Jamaican who goes to New York, sets up the Universal Negro Improvement Association, 1915, transforms Black America. Malcolm X's father was a Garveyite. You can look even into the civil rights movement. Many of those people had parents and relatives who were Garveyites. We have to remember that remembering rightly and dealing with selective historical amnesia means that we also have to remember what one scholar calls Black aliveness. The way that we have strived and thrived and developed despite the system. It's the first point. I'm going to be brief. I'm going to keep it brief because I'm getting traumatized about them long sermons. I can hear them in my head, and that's that song coming up with the altar call coming up. So not only must we deal with selective historical amnesia, we also have to remember rightly by foregrounding dangerous memories. Dangerous memories are what Johann Baptist Metz, German philosopher, means when he says we have to foreground things in history that challenge us today. Challenge how we understand the world works today. And if we foreground them, then it means that we have a chance at not repeating the mistakes of the past. Dangerous memories, Metz says then, they challenge the way in which capitalism works. The worst excesses of capitalism. They challenge the way in which injustice works in the present, because he argues we have to bring to the foreground what he called the history of collective suffering. He was a German talking about Jewish history. The history of collective suffering then means that we never forget the atrocities that the people in the slave and colonial world went through. But this memory isn't one that is victimized or sanitized or stops us from being mobilized, but one that challenges us from repeating these mistakes of the past. And that's why Malcolm X said, if everybody studied Black history, they'd become anti-racist. Because it's a dangerous memory. If you learn how racism was constructed, you can blame the Germans, you see, because German philosophers in the 16th and 17th century play a great part in developing biological racism. If we learn that, and if we learn how biological racism then in the early 20th century gets reconfigured into a form of cultural racism, especially after the Second World War, culture becomes the foreground. The way in which you talk about race, nobody talks about biological racism in the world today. So our culture, it's explored in terms of space, immigration, migrants, ways in which we other people and fix them as being less than. If we teach this history, according to Metz, it challenges us today. Want to eradicate racism? Teach the history of how racism developed and evolved and has transformed and works in aspects of society. And that's one of the most powerful ways in which you can build a resistance movement to it. Universities have been doing this in North America since the 1980s. I did my first degree in North America in the end. I actually went to America on a scholarship. Even in the 1980s, the liberal institutions were teaching what became known as whiteness studies in Britain in the 1990s, where they helped students understand how whiteness as a system that emerges in the slave and colonial world worked in America in the 1980s, 1990s. We picked it up in 1992, book published by Richard Dyer, a film studies critic in London. 1992 wrote the first book about whiteness in Britain called White. And he said, we need to even go beyond, making sure that black people understand, people racialized as black understand black history. We need to understand that people racialized as white understand how whiteness works, what it means to be white in the world. If you sociology, so you got to do sociology. You won't do this in geography or political science. A sociologist, wrong with this. Because they understand that if you foreground how whiteness emerged as a system of superiority, as a system of power, as a system of economic exploitation, it means you can help people racialized as white step out of whiteness. You see, whiteness is the system. It's not the epidermis, it's the system. And therefore, this dangerous memory can empower even people racialized as white to understand how they can resist it themselves. You see, sociologists tell jokes about this, but they're not funny jokes, because no sociology Professor OBE tells funny jokes, but they tell jokes about how they've stepped out of whiteness. You see? It's a dangerous memory that can be used to challenge and empower us in the present. So not only, to remember rightly, do we need to ensure that we deal with dangerous memories, we foreground them, not only do we have to ensure that we deal with selective historical amnesia, but in order to remember rightly, the third and final point I want to make is that we have to strive for reparations. Reparations is complex. It emerges as a term after the First World War. Remember, if you did your First World War history in school, your GCSE history, or back in the day, your CSE history, you always do the First World War. Why did Germany go to war? Why did Hitler rise? Well, you start with the peace settlement after the First World War, 2018, and how they asked Germany to pay back the damage that they'd done. It introduces the concept of reparations. After the Second World War, Germany pays reparations to what becomes the State of Israel, compensation, recognizing what had taken place. But more recently, in the discipline of legal studies, transitional justice, they've developed reparations as a much more holistic system. See, reparations is two parts. It's about, first of all, dealing with the harm that was done and acknowledging that harm. And that's why remembering rightly, dealing with selective historical amnesia matters. That's why foregrounding dangerous memories matters. You've got to make people aware of the harm that took place. But it also, on the other hand, deals with repair. How do you then repair the damage? And there are two camps. You see, there are people like me in the repair camp. Sorry, in the harm camp. Because I want to make sure people understood what actually happened, because most people couldn't tell you the difference between Marcus Garvey and Marcus Rashford. Couldn't tell you the difference between having a plantain for dinner and living on the plantation. People are ignorant about this history, and they're ignorant about their ignorance, which means they don't understand that they're ignorant about their ignorance. So I'm interested in making people aware of the social and economic harm that was done. That's why we made the film nearly 20 years ago, 2005, Empire Pays Back. It's still a grainy copy on YouTube, which calculates how much Britain owes the English-speaking Caribbean in financial compensation. But that's just one way in which you do reparations, is through the finance. We came to 7.5 trillion. We more recently did a project with a group of pro bono lawyers, superstar lawyers in North America, called the Brattle Group. And the Americans, you get the American lawyers involved, they see money. See money where there's no money. We use 3 categories, they use 5. Came up with 22 trillion pounds. Oh, now we know Britain hasn't got that kind of money. The economy only turns over 3.5 trillion if we're lucky. The way this government is going, the way the last government left it, maybe 2 trillion. The way things are going, it's not good. But what we want is an accurate assessment of what is owed, so people understand the harm that was done. But reparations doesn't stop there. Reparations is also about restitution. Restitution means you restore to people what they lost. That restitution is partly cultural. That restitution is partly social. That restitution is economic, where there are economic. That restitution is psychological, but you have to restore people. Who were the first people to talk about being restored in music? About restoration? The Rastas. Move ya back to Africa, remember? Aswad? If you want to go back even a bit earlier, late 1960s, the Abyssinians. There is a land far, far away. See, I didn't sing in church choir. Where there's no light, there's only day. Because the Rastafarians understood that restoration was the first thing you had to do in terms of reparation, being restored, being reconnected to Africa. Reparations is also about what we call satisfaction. Satisfaction is a legal category. It means that you're satisfied that the justice has been done because truth and reconciliation has taken place. So there has to be truth-telling. People have to search at what happened and truth-tell it, and then there has to be satisfaction. There's satisfaction when you know there's going to be what we call non-reoccurrence. Racism ends, the discrimination ends because you've dealt with the truth and reconciliation. You see, remembering rightly what these two artifacts stand for is the power of memory. And we can't do justice to this project. We can't do justice to our ancestors. We can't do justice to inclusion, racial justice today, and how it's intersected with other forms of justice in the world today. Disability, I heard somebody talking about earlier on. All of these things, we can't do justice if we do not remember rightly. So I'd encourage you, to not only support this project, it needs to be a national project. I'm not saying it's Wolverhampton is a small place, because it is. I'm just joking. Wolverhampton is a small, not just saying it's because it should stay in Wolverhampton. It's a national project, but remember rightly. Don't fall foul to selective historical amnesia. Retain these history as a dangerous memory and join the fight for repair, not only in terms of the harm, but also celebrating the ways in which we've repaired in the past and will continue to do so in the present. Thank you.
Wow, big hand for my twin. We could sit and listen all evening. It's just incredible, that idea that the victor writes the history. And also, John Santayana, he made that statement, if we do not learn from the mistakes of the past, we'll be doomed to repeat them. And I'm reading a fascinating book at the moment by a man called Victor Lowen. It's called The Lies My Teacher Taught Me. And so we have to unlearn and relearn. So I'd like to thank you so much for the time. Can we have a big hand again, please? Thank you for Professor Robert Beckford. Bless you. Thank you so much. And hopefully we could call you up on another occasion for a longer, maybe a weekend or something. It'd be wonderful. Thank you so much. And now we're going to have another little bit of poetry by a lady called Emma Bradbury. She's a single mother raising a son and daughter. She is so proud of. She currently works as a senior social worker with children and families, and also is an AMHP, which is an approved mental health professional or practitioner in her spare time. But before she comes up, I just want you to know that I myself write a bit of poetry, and I've got here's a piece. Just give you a taste. There were two sisters, Esther and Ruth. They were quite feisty, to tell you the truth. The one has called the other a pest. Which one it was, I'll leave you to guess. And so, like Bianca, I'll keep it short and invite Emma to come up. Emma Bradbury, thank you.
Okay. Well, first of all, I don't do poetry all the time, so I do it in my spare time. So I'm not going to be able to do justice to some poetry that we've heard earlier. But I've done this for Ruth because she asked me to do it, and actually it's a poem from, was it last year? Yeah. So, together we gather in unity and pride. Our hearts are as one as we close the divide. Today we declare solidarity and we appreciate black love. We honour our forefathers, our mothers, our lineage and our ancestral blood. We celebrate our greatness, our unfaltering resilience, and it's our story. We embrace the wonder of our culture, our beauty and our glory. We reset our crowns, our unwavering spirit, a light that just shines because they just could not dim it. It's in the way that we move, our achievements, our tribe and our plight. We give thanks for our freedom, we fight for our rights. We can't take this for granted, it was brought with blood, sweat and tears. And we continue to commemorate our warriors as we count down the years. These words may burn my chest as I speak, and my spirit may feel heavy, and my mind may feel weak. I share with you these emotions, not to upset or distress, but moreover to ensure that we always bear witness. Sadly, statues still celebrate the burden of slaves, commemorating the actions that led to their graves. False lies and media still used as political bait. Sensationalised headlines used to facilitate hate. Segregation still exists in the courtrooms and classes, distorting the minds of the middle-class masses. Insidious and hidden in textbook and tongue. On this we must speak, it's been happening too long. Although our hearts may feel grasped by invisible hands that have twisted the knife in colonised lands, where coffee and cotton were worth more than life, where black people were subjected to slavery and strife. But we're all born of the blood of the great. We no longer need war and we rid ourselves of hate. Today we symbolise love, we action God's plan. We reflect on the waymakers, the table shakers and the Windrush generation. Today we remember their fight and their win. We move forward with grace, we choose faith and not sin. May our children wear the crowns of our forefathers and kin. May they always rise up, may they never give in. May they battle with weapons of love, faith and blessings. May they see their resilience as one of life's handed down lessons. So what now we say, what is our next move? Let's do what we do best and create our own groove. Black people are anointed with music, love and light. We know this because in our darkest hours it gave us our fight. Our children deserve a society where any creed and colour can enter, where love is the key and the heart is the centre. On this note I state that this wound cannot heal until every nation declares that they will rewrite the deal. Where truths are not dissolved in patriarchal lies and institutes and establishments abolish divides. Where penal systems don't favour the intimidation of black skin and require more than stereotypes to lock our brothers in. When schools expose the impact of supremacist white fragility and celebrate our children based on their academic ability. Where resources are shared both equally and fair, and strangers don't feel that they can just touch my hair. When mothers can rely on more than hope and a prayer, because the fear of oppression follows everywhere. The SuCoTeTo Wreath is a symbol of remembrance, of healing, of love and of hope. Immortalised by the brave and the bold, those capitalised, enslaved but not broke. Brown is the colour of cocoa, coffee and caramel tea, the colour of my skin that lovingly covers me. At the centre is a cotton flower enveloped in sweet sugar, a commodity that vanquished life from one country to another, all harvested in bloodshed that led straight to the grave. But today we choose to reclaim our wealth and use it to honour our brave.
Wow. Ian Henry has introduced the SuCoTeTo Wreath in his poem and open our eyes to it. And Emma Bradbury has made that link with the lecture of Professor Beckford about lest we forget. It all came out there, lest we forget. We cannot forget. And if we do, the future, no pun intended, is dark. So thank you again. Can we have a big hand, please? Thank you. And now, Sharon Platt MacDonald. I'm going to invite her up. Now, she works as the Director of Health for Women's Ministries in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And there are many other things as well. She's pursued a career in the caring profession and as a registered nurse and a number of other things as well. And she's here as the wife of my good friend Denzel MacDonald. Oh, he looked up there. There he is, Denzel. We've been friends for many years. So can we have a big hand for Sharon Platt MacDonald, who's going to come up? Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. It's an absolute delight to be here and to share in this momentous occasion. And, you know, I'd just like to share one of my favourite quotes on hope, which says, "Hope is the light in the distance that keeps the visions of your goals illuminated." And today is an example of the goals and aims with the SuCoTeTo Wreath and all that it stands for, its aims and objectives. And, you know, hope is ignited as we heard the various speakers and who chronicled the distance that we've travelled so far. You know, yesterday with its trials and triumphs reminds us of where we were and where our journey began. But we can't stay in the past because Willie Jolly puts it this way: the past is a place of reference, not a place of residence. And so we can't sit in the past. We need to keep the engine going. And today, with this second anniversary, reminds us to keep active because there's more to come. And so today, as we acknowledge the now, it ignites us with hope and action, as we can hear all the wonderful things that's going to be happening with C.A.R.E, with the Communities Against Racism Enterprise and the SuCoTeTo Flower and the Wreath. We can see that there's a lot of action to come, and action ignites or promotes hope. So what am I hoping for? Well, I'm hoping for change. On this second anniversary, it's an opportunity for us to reflect on why change is necessary. And it can be, and to see what actions is actually we need to undertake to make change happen. And as I thought about that, what needs to change, I just put a few words down. And I want you to just listen to some of these categories because it's something that has marked our history. And so for the enslavement of our ancestors and the subsequent transgenerational traumas that has ensued, we want to address those wounds and rebuild hope in order to foster healing and recovery. We want to see the abolition of the abolishment, rather, of every yoke that has enslaved individuals and stalled their progress so that every captive will be set free. We want to see our people shake off the shackles of restrictive limitations and rise to the stature of excellence that God intended for them. And it is our hope that as they do so, they will receive the affirmation that will enrich their spirit and nurture their full potential. For every covert and overt discriminatory experience we have encountered, for the abuse of power of one race over another, for the dismissal of black history, the dehumanization of individuals and the suppression of the culture of black descendants, we want to see respect, acceptance, and inclusion. For all who have been traumatized by racism both directly and indirectly, we want to see a change so that individuals who were harmed will not focus on their pain and become stagnated by their hurt, but push past the discomfort to embrace restoration, renewal of spirit, and gain the resilience to move forward. For perpetrators of racial crimes, we want to see change that brings conviction and remorse. Equality that we also want to see, equally, we also want to see people let go of the bitterness and embrace forgiveness so that we can truly move forward. For the exploitation of individuals who have profited at the expense of others that they deemed less than themselves, whilst we seek restitution for what was stolen, taken, or withheld, as well as the reparation of our minds, I want to see us embrace tools to know how to protect ourselves and preserve our resources so that the atrocity of slavery will never, ever be repeated. We are expecting a change that yields hope in the attitude of those in our host nation who treat people who are different to them as less than themselves. And instead, our hope is to see the extended hand of equality and equity uniting every nation, every tongue, and people. But we are mindful of those who are broken-hearted and crushed in spirit. For every suppressed individual, may they be reminded that they were created in God's glorious image. And may God, who is the true healer of hearts and restorer of minds, be the replacement for what our people have suffered, so they will thrive under divine care. Now, I want to share with you a formula that I've used to help me over difficult times, especially when I've experienced traumatic experiences, racism, the whole issue. And I've used the word hope as an acronym, and that helped to navigate me through those turbulent times, but also to keep me grounded. And so H is for help and healing. O is for opportunities and obstacles. P is for pray, for plan, and for pursue. And E for encouragement and envision. Now, I just want to talk about those very briefly. Now, help. You know, if we get the right help, we can flourish and healing will come. So getting the right help ignites hope. Now, my faith was a great source of help for me when I encountered a lot of racist comments and actions. And in fact, one of the things that I used to help me was scripture, especially when negative words were spoken over my life. So my form tutor in sixth form said to me, "Sharon, you'll never be a nurse, you're not strong enough." And so I embraced the scripture in Philippians 4, verse 13, daily as a daily affirmation, which says, "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." And I graduated in class of 83 as a general nurse from the Nightingale School of Nursing, St Thomas's Hospital, then went on to study midwifery and health visiting, and then on to healthcare management in several positions. And so whatever your source of help, you need to embrace that, because it will be the ignition that keeps you going, even when people want to stall your progress. So scripture was a help to me. Then healing. You may ask yourself the question, what has hurt you? What has harmed you? And unless you address these questions honestly, you are delaying your healing from the wounds of the past. And the stresses of the present, and even the fears for the future. And I'm not going to spend too long on healing, because I know that Esther's going to talk about that later. But I've been able to do some restorative workshops that help people address the hurt and harm they've experienced so that they can move on. Opportunities. Now, in trying to surmount, in rising above the numerous experiences of discrimination that I encountered, I always look for an opportunity to turn those obstacles that I encountered and those negative incidences into a positive lesson. So, for instance, in terms of my career, I had a whole career year stolen when my form tutor, who was white, hid all the applications of black students. Now, some of you heard my story before, so I'll just shorten it because of time tonight. And so for 1 year, I'd applied to 3 or 4 nursing schools, and I didn't hear anything for a year. And it wasn't until after a while that we knew that our form teacher had hidden all of our applications and none of us got to university or nursing school, whatever we wanted for that year. So in that time when I was ringing and they said, no, we didn't get your application, I decided that I would go to St Thomas's to do an auxiliary course. So of course the auxiliary nursing is not a qualified course. But in that year while I was waiting, I had to reapply to the various schools of nursing. And I went in and did the auxiliary nursing, which is just basically bedside nursing. I remember on a Saturday when we used to have our church brethren come to the hospital to visit various people, and I had the auxiliary uniform was a yellow, a sort of beigeish colour, and they knew that I'd done my O-levels and A-levels and so on, and that I was waiting to go into nursing. But here comes my church family, and I've got this auxiliary, like almost like an untrained garb on. And I remember as I saw my church members coming in, I would run and hide in the sluice because I felt so ashamed. But in that year, I learned blood pressures and temperature and pulses and how to do all the basic nursing care. So that when I actually started nursing a year later, I was way ahead of my peers, because I could do all of that and sort of sail through, and God helped me to do so successfully. And in fact, because I was able to graduate at the top of the class, they enabled me, my third year, they asked me to mentor the first year students. So sometimes obstacles can become opportunities in a way if we know how to embrace them. So obstacles, how do we learn from obstacles? Addressing obstacles to our progress is also very important, the way we do it. And when we've overcome an obstacle, it's important for us to come alongside others, to encourage them, to say, look, you know, this looks as though you're stuck here in this position, you may never move forward. This is what happened to me, and share. So as a result of the many obstacles I encountered, we don't have time to go through them tonight, but I've now become an advocate for individuals who are facing traumatic situations, those who have suffered racism and trauma, and giving them advice on how to move forward, how to address it, some of the legal frameworks as well, but some of the life skills, basically, and coming alongside them to support them on their journey. And so when we come alongside others facing challenges and traumas, it gives them a resolve to keep going and knowing that progress and success is a possibility, and to be able to thrive in spite of their challenges. And so that has been something that I've striven to do. So the P in hope, H-O-P-E, is the power of prayer. And the power of prayer has been central in my life, because every hurdle that I've encountered, every difficulty I've experienced, I've always prayed and asked others to pray on my behalf, and I've seen marvelous answers to prayer. And so with every situation I face, I know that prayer and belief in God has got me through. But then also plan. You don't just sit on your knees praying all day. You've got to do something. And so I'm so encouraged to hear the plans of individuals who have actually done something to move life forward for our people. And so I applaud the work of C.A.R.E as I hear the plans that they have. So whatever your plans are, put them into progress, and so that they can materialize. Then pursue. We need to take positive action to pursue justice, equality, and equity for our race. And it was Bernice King who said this: continue to speak out against all forms of injustice to yourselves and others, and you will set a mighty example for your children and for your future generation. And then encourage. You know, when we undertake events such as this, it's such a source of encouragement to show us what is possible, where we've traversed our life journeys, and taking action gives us the vistas of possibilities for a brighter tomorrow that's coloured in greater colours than our darkened past. And we encourage others also to take action. And recently, in addressing a particularly difficult issue, we have to try and ignite infuse encouragement even where there's discouragement. And I had to deal with a particularly difficult situation recently, and I've been encouraged by great orators of the past and people like Desmond Tutu. And I quoted this quote I'm going to share with you now in that particular situation that I was working with someone on. And his statement says this: if you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. If an elephant has its foot on the tail of a mouse and you say that you're neutral, the mouse will not appreciate your neutrality. And I quoted this proverb in the situation we were dealing with, and there was swift resolution. And then lastly, to envision. What do you wish to see? Lastly, in the HOPE acronym, what do you wish to envision for the UK 5, 10, 15 years from now in terms of addressing disparities? There's an ongoing work that we cannot achieve alone. It has to be done together. And this is why I love the quote from Helen Keller when she says this: alone we can do so little, but together we can do so much. And even the collective attendees here, there's so much that we can do. And so I applaud again the work of C.A.R.E for the launch of the SuCoTeTo Wreath and their determination to the preservation, promotion, protection, projection and progress of our race. And I just want to go through those very quickly as I'm not going to take too much longer. And in these 5 key elements, I really applaud them for one, persevering and preserving what is ours, because our heritage, the richness of our history, our milestones, our memories, it's what Marcus Garvey said: a people without knowledge of their past origin and their past history, origin and culture is like trees without roots. If you don't have any knowledge. And so I want to applaud Ruth and Esther for keeping us rooted and in our cultural heritage. Number 2, to promote. Together, the promotion of this cause that we have to here brings awareness. And if we don't cast the spotlight, no one sees. SuCoTeTo puts the spotlight on the milestone that has marked our history and contribution on the world stage. So keep on promoting. Thirdly, to protect, we need to protect our story. It says that if you want to understand today, you have to search yesterday. So thank you, Professor Beckford, for doing that. And our story matters because it brings significance to our trajectory. And we need to write our story, because if we don't, others will write our story for us. And it might sound different to what we would want to say. And so we also have to protect our people and those who are vulnerable. My mother protected me in utero when she was on the tube, heavily pregnant uterus, 8 months pregnant, and she received a vicious blow to her abdomen. And this would happen each time she traveled. And after she had the first attack, and she had to go to hospital with a threatened miscarriage, but I didn't come prematurely because God had a birth date for me. But she protected me in subsequent journeys by putting a large bag over her abdomen. I don't know who you're protecting or what you need to use to protect, but we need to protect those who are vulnerable. Fourthly, to project. We need to point people in the direction of travel and bring them along with us. And when we project a vision of hope for the future, we give others the impetus to reach further than they dare and believe that they can reach their goals. And 5, to progress. Martin Luther King says, if you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, and whatever you have to do, just do it to keep moving forward. And finally, may the preserving power of God that has sustained our achievements thus far, that has preserved our people through 400 years of slavery, that has chronicled our achievements to this present day, may he give us hope and courage to rise from the lowlands of despair and climb every mountain to view the vistas of possibilities that lie before us. And may we hold on to hope as we seek God's blessing to empower our men with fortitude, accountability and excellence, that they will become efficacious pillars in our community. May we hold on to hope that as we petition God to cover our women with dignity, resourcefulness and expertise, that they will shine like gems in our hands and in the sight of others. May we hold on to hope for the prayers that we extend for our children, that they will rise up as a productive generation that will excel in their contribution to society. May we hold on to hope so that our elders will see the rewards of their labours in the joyful realisation that they have not toiled in vain. So hold on to hope. I encourage us all to embrace the hope that is within us, around us, and for us as we look forward with renewed vision to the establishment of God's kingdom, his heavenly kingdom of righteousness, where the sin of racism, discrimination, oppression, suppression, and stigmatization will never, ever rise again. But we will enjoy true equality, abiding in peace, ultimate safety, and eternal freedom, restored in the image of our Creator, redeemed by the saving grace of Jesus, glorified in the Father, accepted by the Son, applauded by the angels, celebrated with the saints of all ages for all of eternity, in the earth made new. It is to this hope that our hope prevails.
Well, thank you very much, Sharon Platt MacDonald. There's a dangerous fire about her. It's kind of, she reminds me of Maya Angelou or Angela Davis. You know, there's some, when she's up here, don't mess. Thank you so much. And now I'd like to invite, as we come towards the end of the program, the latter part, Donna Palmer to come up with Ruth. Now, Donna is a care marketing and media coordinator. She has currently given up much of her work to actually, she worked for Birmingham and Solihull Family and Drug Alcohol Court, and she currently is pursuing a master's degree in social work. And Ruth's going to come up with her, because I think they have a little something to present, if I understand it correctly. This is Donna here.
Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody. Hi. So, Church's Positive Change is a community initiative which comprises of pastors and community leaders from Wolverhampton. They empower people to facilitate positive change, especially within our African Caribbean community. Church Positive Change have worked during COVID to look at the impact of COVID in our community. They've also established an allotment in this area. It's a community project that helps to promote friendship, community cohesion, mental health support, skills so people can grow organic produce, healthy lifestyles, but it also facilitates intergenerational elements with 2 local schools. The project also works in partnership with Wolverhampton Public Health, directors from City of Wolverhampton Council, Wolverhampton Trust, the police and other statutory agencies. So many of us might know of this project because we all attend, I hope, the annual family banquet that's held in Heath Park, in Heath Town, August Bank Holiday, yeah, and the fundraising concert they held. Some of you aware of that? No? Okay, so they hold annual family days in Heath Town Park. They have one coming up on Bank Holiday. So far, they've reached about 3,000 people that attend this project now. So the next one's coming up in August. I hope you all attend. But on behalf of C.A.R.E, we'd like to present Bishop Reuben King an award for his community work for the people of Wolverhampton, particularly the black community. And we're just wishing you all the success for the future and just praying that God blesses you and all the pastors that work with you in the city.
Bishop Reuben, we've had a wonderful working relationship. You've always accommodated. I remember when we first introduced the SuCoTeTo, I said it right, the SuCoTeTo Wreath to you, and you supported it. And I thought, if he can support something that he's never heard, God is working with you. And I can see that Church of Positive Change is a blessing to the community, as Donna rightly said. And it's a barbecue in the park, and you have to attend because it's amazing. This is really heavy. So without further ado, I want to thank you for your work in the community. You've got a wonderful team behind you. And it's a collective of churches, even the Seventh-day Adventist Church is a part of it as well. So you've done a wonderful job. And I want to present this to you and say thank you for being a wonderful community champion. Take this, and I hope it's a blessing not only to you but to the wider community and hopefully nationally. Thank you very much. God bless you. You're welcome. Oh, sorry, you want to take a picture from the back?
Oh, okay.
It's cool. Done it.
Doesn't seem to be interested in taking a photo of me. Oh, all right, we'll move on. Now, I'd like to, we've spoken about all the hurt. We've raked up the past and the history and all that's hidden and unpleasant. And we brought it up. But it's kind of easy to do that in a sense, to bring up all this stuff. But it's important also to speak about solutions and about healing. Sharon Platt MacDonald has spoken and not just raised the issues, but she gives the impression that she does something about it as well. And this is something that we must all do. And at this point, it's important and appropriate to introduce Esther Douglas. She's the director of EdSpace. Now, that's not bad pronunciation. EdSpace. That's what it's called. It starts with an E, not an H. Training and consultancy services, and is dedicated to enhancing the lives of children in foster care. And she'll tell you more about that. I'll just move off the stage in case she remembers my poem. Big hand, please.
Emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. Powerful words. I'm not as good as you, but these are powerful words. When I hear that song of redemption story, I hear that line specifically resonates with me every single time. Because we are all have been taught about slavery, and it has slaved our minds. Whether you are the victim or the perpetrator, we have been told that if your colour of your skin is of a particular shade, that you're not valued or worthy. And Robert has spoken and Sharon has spoken, so I'm not going to go too much into it. But we all need to free our minds. We have the power of choice. How we choose to think and feel. And it's important to our emotional well-being. We need each other to survive. Today we might have felt uncomfortable, but it's good to feel uncomfortable. Because when you're feeling uncomfortable, it gives you an opportunity to stop and think about, why am I feeling uncomfortable? What is it about this situation that has affected my
emotions. It gives us that time to refine our minds in a positive way. The SuCoTeTo Wreath of Remembrance, Hope and Healing, it's about us that are here and those that are watching online, we're saying that we no longer want to digest the pain of racial trauma, whether you are the victim or the perpetrator. Because as Communities Against Racism Enterprise, when we set it up, it was about helping those suffering from racial trauma through the reparation of their minds. Because even though we may ask for reparations of finances, if our minds are not in the right place, those finances will not actually do us any good. It will probably do us more harm. So, when we think of racism, or actually, Robert actually touched on it. My husband used to have a poster up in the house, and every time we used to walk down the stairs, the poster used to say, before there was any history, there was black history. Before there was any history, there was black history. I never really took much notice of it and really resonated until I started on my journey of discovery about racial trauma and the injustice of it. When we think of black history, as Robert said earlier on, we think of the transatlantic black slave history, but actually it's all of our history. Because if you are a victim of slavery, then to be a victim, that has to be a perpetrator. And so, the two come together. But the problem is when you think of, if you are a perpetrator, there is what we call in our field, that element of shame. That's why when you say to somebody, that was uncomfortable or a racist remark, they get upset and they you're not calling me a racist. Well, I remember, and we talk about changing the narrative, and I remember challenging somebody on a racist comment that they made. And they said to me, I'm offended. And I said, okay, so what makes your offense and pain to the shame that you're now carrying more important to what you did to me, I repeated. And I said, you know what? It's just as difficult for me to have challenged you as it is for you to hear it. And part of healing is sometimes having difficult conversations, uncomfortable conversations. But the way that we have those uncomfortable conversations, it needs to come from a place where you understand that the perpetrator is carrying difficult feelings as much as the victim. Now, if you're sitting at the place of a victim, hearing me say that would be, nah, man, what are you talking about? That's just terrible, that's just their behavior. But from the beginning of time, the devil has always tried to separate us from the garden, from now, to make us fight against each other. If we say we are all one race, one blood, one people, then it has to be that somebody has placed these thoughts and feelings in our minds to make that when people carry that shame of being a perpetrator, that they will feel that they are bad people. So there is things we say, people feel guilty about things that they've done, but shame is when people feel that they're bad. And shame is one of those things that when people carry shame, they then enact out in a multitude of ways. Sometimes they will try and minimize it. Sometimes they will be vindictive and hurtful on top of it. Sometimes they will actually say to you, I don't know what your problem is. But when we think of shame, or they will avoid it. As part of healing, we have what's called restorative practice, and Sharon has spoken about it, and Robert has spoken about it. And I'm not going to spend too long because I'm just going to condense everything. Having a difficult conversation or restorative conversation, you have to understand the story. What is the story? The story is you did something that I didn't like, you called me a name, you minimized my appearance, you said something that impacted on me. And if you understand trauma isn't just about the big things, it's about the little things. When we talk about trauma is what happened inside of you as a result of what happened to you. I'll say it again. Trauma is what happened inside of you as a result of what happened to you. So that's why the way that people respond depends on their experience and their journey. So when you will get, like what Robert said, when you will get somebody that is black saying that Britain is not racially institutionalized, then you have to think, are they carrying an element of what I said about shame, where you will try and avoid it, or you will try not, because the pain is so difficult for you that you cannot even tolerate. You know, when you belly is feeling, you want to vomit and you try to hold it down. So a lot of time when people feel shame, they will try and minimize, avoid, they will try and tack, they will withdraw, or they will make you feel that you're the one with the issue. And I always love that when people say, you've got a chip on your shoulder. And I said, have I? I'm glad that you noticed it, because I reckon that you must have put it there. So, the thing is I experienced and I've experienced, and I hear a lot of stories, and it's about us building that resilience. And I'm not going to go too much over what Sharon has said, but I'm just going to talk about and end with like restorative practice. So, as I said, restorative conversation, what happened? What happened? What was the impact? Who was affected by this? So when you're asking about the impact, then that's when shame can set in, because people don't like to know that they've hurt. Has anybody in here never been hurt? Has anybody in here never caused hurt? Have you never caused any hurt? Have you never been hurt? So nobody's putting their hand up. So therefore you've never been hurt. You've never been hurt? And have you ever hurt? You've never hurt anybody. Okay. So that's interesting. So Carol, yes. So Carol and I are friends, and I know that you have been hurt. And I know that you have hurt as well. So that's why you will keep your hand down. But that's what it is. It's about stopping and thinking about what it is when we think about hurt and pain. Because wounds are always going to happen, but scars will also appear. Scars serve as a reminder, but they no longer hurt. So when you start healing, you will get the reminder of the scar, but you will no longer feel the pain. That's when you know that you are healing, or you have healed from your wound, whatever way, shape or form it comes in. And sometimes, you know, you will look and you will see a scar and you think, oh, I was just telling you the story about that and the scar is gone. Because sometimes scars will disappear and they only become a story. When I think about the slavery and how they branded and hurt and did all kind of manner of evil with balls and chains and things, I think of myself last year when I got a burn, a full leg burn, and between 1 to 3 degrees, and when I saw the skin rolling off my leg, and I'm thinking, and they did that for fun? And that tells you that something is not right in your mind, because whether you have been a perpetrator or a victim, when you have to be doing something to somebody, you have to have had an issue, whether your thoughts, your feelings then made you respond. This is where you have to then sit and understand that I have done something bad, and yes, it is shameful, but if we come together and are aligned with each other, we can help each other heal, because these are the things that have been socially constructed and taught to us, that we should be fighting against each other. And so what they do, they have constructed this thing, and because of the shame of what went on in the transatlantic slave, which is also black and white history, to cover it over and sugarcoat it, this is what I say. They then said this was better than this, to make themselves feel better. And so if we understand the simplistically of how somebody can take something so global, then we can take this wreath and make it something global. When they have the poppy, they have said, let's we forget. But let us not forget those who died and shed their blood for the things that we love and enjoy. We need to, as Robert said, this needs to go global, because when this is something that we can do for ourselves, and often as a people, whether black or white, we fear, we start panicking, we say, oh no, because I'm going to lose my job, they're going to hurt me, they're going to do this. But you know what? The pain will come. But at least if the pain is coming while you're trying to be an ally, if the pain is coming while you're trying to be an activist, then at least you know that you are doing according to what, as social beings, surviving together, what is required of us. We want our hearts to heal and not to stay in the pain. We are asking that you share this message with others, as we ask that you will make this a thing of a global phenomenon. When we can be allies with each other, when somebody causes you pain, remember there has been times when we have also caused pain. So sometimes as part of C.A.R.E, we also say C.A.R.E is not just about Communities Against Racism enterprise. It's also about communities. It's also about allyship. It's also about restoration. And it's also about equality, wrapped in some empathy. And even though the abhorrent things that people do and the vindictiveness that people may do, when Sharon said, we will have hope, when Emma said in her poem that no matter how they try to cut you down, you will rise again, because we are a people of resilience. May the conversations be, we always want the best for each other. And when people are not always wanting the best for us, we deal with it in a way to help them to know that being a perpetrator is not something that they are really desiring, but something that they've been taught and are behaving in a way. We will remember there is a Father up in heaven whose character is full of love, as Ruth had said earlier on. And if we are truly the children, then we will always be those beings that all help each other to survive, thrive, regardless of the colour of our skin. Because we are one blood, one race, and one people. Thank you. Can I just say one other thing? Sorry. So
Another half hour?
No. So just to repeat what Ruth has said, I don't know if Adrian you're going to go right. So as co-founder of C.A.R.E, we have the wreath, we also have the aid kit book, and we have the merchandise around there. Adrian has written a book about his story, about his son's situation at the hands of the police. We also have the helpline. We want people to donate. We are supported by Adventist Community Services and Church for Positive Change and EdSpace. And as part of EdSpace, we, safeguarding children from racial trauma. We do the STOP conferences. We talk about therapeutic parenting, because parenting is one of the things that, as Adrian said, as a social worker in the fostering team, and understanding that parenting can be very difficult and our children are traumatized. That's why we have a lot of gangs, why we have a lot of children upset in life, and we need to help them, nurture them, and bring restoration and healing. So I leave this quote. I have learned that people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And that's Maya Angelou. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Esther. Thank you. And at this point, what I would like to do, I'd like to say one thing, and then I want to invite Bianca up again. She's not getting away with a short song like she did last time. She's gonna sing again. But I'd just like to say this one thing. In reality, there's no such thing as black history. All there is history. We call it black history because it had been left out. We want, hey, look at this. You've forgotten this. All there is history, because we are all one race as human beings, and it is our past. So all there is in reality is history. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you all for coming today and for allowing us to be here. But before we close, and Dr. Pedro comes up to close with prayer, I'd like to invite Bianca to come up and sing one more time for us. Thank you. And not for half a minute this time, please. It was beautiful. It was too beautiful to be so short.
Be encouraged. Don't be discouraged. Joy comes in the morning. Know that God is nigh. Stand still and look up. God is going to show up. He is standing by. There's healing for your sorrow. Healing for your pain. Healing for your spirit. Balm in Gilead, there is a balm in Gilead to heal your soul. There is a balm in Gilead, a balm in Gilead, a balm in Gilead to heal our souls. No matter what we're going through, no matter what the news shows you, there is a balm in Gilead to heal our souls. Stand still, look up.
Wow. Can you feel your spirit move? It's powerful. And you know, it's like cooking rice. You know, if you're making stew and it doesn't taste right, you can add bits and stuff. With rice, you can't hide behind it. There's no music. It's a pure voice. This is a gift from God. May God guide you, Bianca. Thank you so much. And now, I'd like to thank you all for coming, and for participating, and for supporting. May God bless you in your families and protect you from the enemy. And may you all fulfill your purpose in this area and others for the reason that God brought you into existence. And Brother Pedro Antonius will now pray to close this proceedings. Thank you so much for coming.
Shall we all stand? Our Lord and Father in heaven, we are grateful for the time you allowed us to spend here and to commune and communicate with one another, but more importantly, to hear your voice telling us that you have the solution, you have the balm, and you're ready to give it to all those who want it. Not only that, you are willing to use anyone who wants to share it with others. So as we go from this place, we pray that your Holy Spirit will keep our thoughts and our minds in you, and in everything going forward, we will seek to honor and glorify you in the way you expect, in the context of everything that was said this evening. Thank you for blessing everyone who was here, has left, everyone who is still here and is living, and everyone who took part in one way or another, and bless those organizers so that they will continue to do your will in this way. I pray and ask and thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
I'd like to thank you, Dr. Pedro Antonius. But before you go, there's a car that's blocking someone in. It's PSV. Oh, is it IPSV? P5 VBM. That's blocking someone in. But I'd like to thank everyone for coming, and God bless you, and may you have a good rest of the week until the weekend. And there's refreshments for me for everyone. There's refreshments for you as well at the back. And while you're having these refreshments, you can interact and network and all of this, but